From Bancor's perspective, what regulatory developments would most directly accelerate the growth of on-chain secondary markets for RWAs?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure there's a simple answer to this. Part of me wants to say the regulatory developments don't really have any impact on the growth of secondary markets for RWAs on chain. The reason I say that is because even within the existing regulatory paradigm, or what was the regulatory paradigm of yesteryear, 2017, 2015, it was still possible to do RWAs on chain if you wanted to. I would say it was more difficult back then, but it wasn't prohibitively difficult. It was really just a question of which jurisdiction did you operate inside of, and how are you handling things like AML, ATF compliance and travel rule and that kind of thing. So in terms of regulatory developments, I can point to Switzerland that has made tokenized representation of securities and commodities a part of its legislation. If the entire world took that perspective, then that could massively accelerate the growth of on-chain secondary markets for RWAs. But at the same time, just because the regulatory landscape is permissive of these things doesn't necessarily mean we should expect an onrush of enormous RWA transaction volume onto blockchains. And I think that that's maybe the expectation that the blockchain community has been fed since the early days of Ethereum, that eventually the regulators are going to catch up and all these institutions are going to want to do all this stuff and so on and so forth. But the reality is that the existing infrastructure with its regulations, if that regulation then becomes compatible with blockchains and the rules are similar in both of those environments, blockchain execution doesn't necessarily offer a huge advantage over non-blockchain execution. In many ways, not doing stuff on a blockchain is preferable to doing it on a blockchain. Now, that's not true everywhere, and it's not true for all asset types or all markets. But I think that the acceleration of growth for RWAs on blockchains has very little to do with regulation at this point, and a lot to do with specifically the people who are moving and interacting with those markets regularly and what their habits are and administrative processes and things for those institutions. So this is a generational thing, not necessarily a regulatory thing. It's kind of like asking, why aren't the baby boomers adopting TikTok? Like, what would accelerate the growth of boomer activity on TikTok? And I think if I put it in that light, it becomes more clear, is that TikTok is built for younger generations, and there's nothing you can do to make boomers interested in using some of these social media applications. And I think the same is going to be true of the RWA markets. In the beginning, there will be a small group who does prefer using blockchains for these things. And that group will continue to grow over time. But it's really a sort of cultural alignment and values alignment more than anything else. We could see that blockchain execution start to solve some of the, let's say, like self-reporting or compliance issues over time. But for now, some of these companies have such massive inertia that even if they are turning their attention to blockchains, and many are, still going to be a long time before they can update their own internal processes and climatize their own customers to using blockchain technology instead of the TradFi alternatives. So yeah, I don't think it's a regulatory issue.